Hello and welcome. Welcome to another edition of Atlas Information Live. I'm your host, Atlas Alex, and I am happy to welcome you today in the spirit of belonging, in the spirit of, well, welcoming everyone. And that is in part what we'll be speaking about today. Because the other night I watched a film on Netflix, which apparently came out in 2023, if I'm not mistaken. And the film is called Jesus Revolution. And I was just pulling up the info on IMDb. It's a film that's based on a true story. And it was, like so many things in my life, not by accident that it arrived or crossed my path just when it did. I want to pull it up though, because I want to be able to share with you some of the actors' names and so on, as the case may be. Um, yeah, maybe I can do this. Hang on a second. Why don't we? There we go. I won't turn the sound on because we always get dinged with copyright when we do that. So you can see some of the actors you'll recognize: Kelsey Grammer, and also the actor who played Jesus in the Chosen, that miniseries, The Chosen, which I don't know if you've been watching that. That, of course, was the miniseries about the New Testament, about the life of Jesus, and about specifically Jesus' ministry from the perspective or the viewpoint of his disciples. So, and that actor's name, oh, I don't know why IMDb makes it so. Yeah, Jonathan Rumi. Yeah, Kelsey Grammer, and those are the two actors that I recognized anyway. Now, what made this film special or meaningful to me, and why I'm sharing it with you today, because it's important when we talk about aspects of the path of awakening and self-realization of the being. That path has on it many bridges. And these bridges come with a kind of toll. And the toll is whether or not we recognize the signs pointing us to traverse whatever obstacle that the bridge traverses. So in this case, it's a river, but it could be, it could be a bridge over a canyon or a chasm, or even a highway, for that matter, a highway overpass. It doesn't matter. That's from a practical, physical point of view. But from a metaphysical, allegorical point of view, these bridges that we encounter, they traverse that which we were unable to negotiate on ourselves. And by negotiate, I mean rectified, overcome. Without the bridge, we are stuck on one side. So a bridge is more than just a continuation of a path or allowing a road to overcome that which blocks it. A bridge is bidirectional. In bridging the gap, whatever that gap was, a gap in our story, a gap in ourselves, a gap in our thinking or our outlook, or the practical application of our deep commitment, our purpose, our destiny. There are gaps, there are moats, walls, obstacles that we do require to overcome, but we cannot do it on our own. And we cannot do it in such a way that it doesn't align with our path. And so it has to be a bridge. The path and the bridge must align. And in that alignment, in that traversal, we now overcome whatever barrier, whatever gap there was. And that bridge is bidirectional now, which means we have negated the gap. It's as though the gap never existed, or practically speaking, for us on our path, it doesn't exist. And the bridge that allows us to move forward on our path, over the gap, negating the gap, overcoming the gap. That bridge is bidirectional, which means that those on the other side, whom we can now reach via the bridge, those on the other side can, if we welcome them, come with us over the bridge to our side and back again. The bridging of that gap negates the gap. And in the negating of the gap, that bridge connects what was before seemingly irreconcilable, but are now one and the same, walking the same path. And indeed, the fact that that bridge is a bridge for us, it allows us to proceed on our path. It was our inability to reconcile or negotiate that gap on our own that held us back, that prevented us from continuing on the path. But that bridge does so. And it's the very nature of that bridge negating that gap, eliminating it functionally and practically from our life and from our path. Now our path proceeds on the other side, and that which is on the other side can come and via that bridge be a part of the same path that we are on. And all of this is well and good. And like so many concepts or so many allegories and analogies when we talk about the path and spirituality and so on, it's all conceptual. It's practically theoretical. It sounds nice, but is it real? How do we make it real? What in other words, just like in business, we need a case study. Here, we talk about self-evident experiential knowledge, that which we seek, practical knowledge, knowledge gained through experience, knowledge which is wrapped in wisdom, or knowledge which blooms out of a root of wisdom. No matter how you orient that in your own consciousness, the connection between wisdom and knowledge of this kind is experience. And because the film Jesus Revolution is based on a true story, we can use it, or turn to it rather, as a practical case study in terms of what we're talking about here. The story takes place, I'll just summarize it very briefly. It takes place pretty much towards the end of the 60s and the latter part of the hippie movement, the hippie revolution, or perhaps not towards the end of the hippie revolution. Maybe it was more towards the beginning or the peak of the hippie movement before it started to decline. And the main characters, or one of the main characters, is a pastor of a church, Cavalry Church, and it's a small little Christian affair, but has a relatively small congregation. And the pastor, played by Kelsey Grammer, is what his daughter calls a square, and that is a term that was coined by the hippies and by young people in general, who thought of themselves as hip and modern and progressive and radical and revolutionary. They use that term square as a pejorative term to label the more conservative, stodgy, traditional people as being backward and limited and caged in their thinking and their outlook and their lives. They were like, rats in a cage, or rats in a maze, if you will, just cogs in the machine. And that the term square, it evokes that. What the thing about a square is that it's uniform, right? All four sides are the same length, and it's hard corners. There's no softness there. There's no flexibility there. Square. So that was the term that they used. And Kelsey Grammer's character, the pastor, very much is that. And he's in an argument with his daughter, who's a teenager, and he is just complaining, as all of society was complaining about the youth at that time, the hippies specifically. The hippies were a real blight on the culture, on Western culture. they were disruptive and protests, and I mean, many have a sort of romantic view about the hippies and the hippie movement. But the Jesus Revolution shows this other side, and the character there is, well, he is a hippie. And I'm so bad with names. I can't even remember a name that I just looked up 5 minutes ago. Jonathan Rumi. So Jonathan Rumi plays here. Here. So he plays this hippie who's traveled around but he's a hippie who has found Jesus. And the pastor's daughter takes up a challenge that her father gives her. He says, if you can introduce me to a hippie that, that, like, you're telling me that they're not all that bad. Well, then if you show me a hippie that isn't all that bad, I'll be happy to welcome him into my home. And she runs into this character played by Jonathan Rumi. Oh, and what's his character's name? That's a good question, isn't it? Is it important? Lonnie Frisbee. So Jonathan Rumi plays this character, Lonnie Frisbee. And she's driving along and she gives him a ride. She gives him a lift. And they start talking in the car, and he starts talking about Jesus and how he found Jesus. He just came from San Francisco or wherever he came from, and he was telling her about how people are lost in this hippie movement, and that he found Jesus, and so on and so forth. And he starts talking to her about Christianity and Jesus and this and that. So she decides that this is the hippie. This is the hippie that she has to introduce to her father, the pastor. And that it was like serendipitous, right? A few days or few hours before, her father said, bring me a hippie who's different and I'll welcome him into my home. And then she's driving along and she decides to stop for Lonnie Frisbee. And he turns out to be essentially a born again Christian. And so she takes him home, because he's a hippie, right? He doesn't have any place to stay anyway. And he starts speaking with her father. And he says something that was very telling. And he said, all these kids, doing these drugs and what is it? Dropping out, tuning in, dropping out, whatever that hippie slogan was. Tune in, something, drop out. Anyway, he says, what are they if not looking for truth? What are they if not looking for answers? And he said, what are they if not looking for God? They're looking for God. They just don't know it. And the bridge between man and God is Jesus from the Christian perspective. That is the Christ. That's the God force in activity, the God made flesh. Christ is the bridge between man and God. And Kelsey Grammer's character, the pastor, who I should probably get his proper name, Chuck Smith was the pastor's name. He sees something, he recognizes something in this Lonnie Frisbee character. And he sees this Lonnie Frisbee character as a possible bridge. And he invites him to stay in his home. And he invites him to come to his church. And Lonnie Frisbee said, I would love to come to your church. Can I bring some friends? And the story proceeds from there. It's a true story without giving anything away, right? But I mean, it's a true story, so I don't know how much I'd be giving away anyway. The long and the short of it is Chuck Smith's church grows in size. His parish, his congregation grows exponentially over a matter of weeks and months, because the word gets out that here is a Christian church that is building bridges and is inviting and welcoming with open arms those who were at that time in the United States one of the most undesirable class of individual to the squares, to the establishment, the hippies. And not just hippies, but also people of color and et cetera, et cetera. So the outcasts, the undesirables, the outliers. And Chuck Smith invites them to come to his church and invites them to participate. He invites Lonnie Frisbee to come and share in the sermon, in giving the sermon. And Lonnie Frisbee brings some of his musician friends to come and play in church, and they essentially, one of the bands, essentially the fathers of Christian rock. There's an entire genre of pop music, which is basically faith-based music, Jesus music or Christian rock music. And Lonnie Frisbee was instrumental in bringing that band into this church and having the church grow and grow and grow with this band as a part of it. And the band started getting success and established this whole new genre of music. And there are more characters involved that enter into the story, and one of whom actually becomes a pastor at his own church. And that church exists to this day. It's known as Harvest, and it has multiple churches across the United States. And I don't know how many membership, but it's in the tens of thousands, if not more than that. I don't know about tens of millions. I can't remember what the epilogue on the movie said, but regardless, the point is that Jesus Revolution as a film is a sign. It's a case study, and it's a signpost where every sign on that post is pointing in a different direction, but they all say the same thing. Bridge this way, bridge that way, bridge this way, that way, every way. Bridge the gaps. And as a story, and as characters on the path, on their own path, each and every last character in this movie must build a bridge, must bridge a gap. That is what this film is all about. There is not a character in the film that is faced with a gap, a chasm, an obstacle that their path then challenges them to overcome, to bridge that gap in order to be able to continue on the path toward their destiny. Every single character in the film, every last one. Now, some characters turn away. They refuse to build that bridge. And ergo, they remain stuck on their side. So the film is not sugarcoating anything here. It's sharing a kind of honest portrayal that not everybody wants to build bridges, right? Some people want to stay on their side or on their camp or in their comfort zone. And as you well know, especially no matter where you live, doesn't matter, especially in this world of politics and identity politics, this polarized world that we live in, you know that people who are entrenched on their side of whatever gap, and if they're unwilling to build bridges, not only are they in their comfort zone, in their echo chamber, as that's the term that they use online, right? And in the comfort and security on their side, but they hurl insults over the gap, and they point fingers, and they hurl insults, and they condescend, and they patronize, and they run the other side down. Them over there, those over there. Exactly how at the beginning of the film, all the squares in the movie are running down the hippies. Oh, those hippies over there. And the hippies, in turn, calling everybody on the other side squares, right? Oh, they're stodgy, they're old, they're stuck in their ways, they're stuck in the past, and they're stuck in Vietnam, in the quagmire of Vietnam, and supporting, this and that. So, but the film is called Jesus Revolution. Now, revolution is to revolve. And you can't say the word revolve without evolve. It's evolve with an R. And although I can't roll my R's, if you can roll your R's and say the word revolve with that R at the beginning, then it's like an engine supercharging that evolution. And that's the alm of life. That's that revolutionary analogous ultimate methodology that challenges us to do what? To descend before we can ascend. To face that which is our opposition. But it's not just a revolution, right? We're not just talking about the French Revolution and taking the elite out of their mansions and Marie Antoinette and putting their heads under the guillotine. No, no, no. The film is called Jesus Revolution. And in fact, the film gets its name from the cover of Time magazine. Let me okay. And now this was, when was this? June 21st, 1971. Yeah, June 21st, 1971. This was the cover of Time magazine, The Jesus Revolution. And the journalist who wrote this article is featured in the film. And his journey from one side of the gap to the other, he watched as bridges were being built. And he's asked in the film about it, and he's like, I'm just a neutral observer. But he documented the entire process, and then he wrote about it in Time magazine. It wasn't just a revolution. It was the Jesus Revolution. Who is this Jesus? Well, there's the Jesus that we know, but then there's the meaning of the word. Hey, Zeus. Hey, meaning of or from. That hey, that, and Zeus is God, who sits upon Mount Olympus. And Zeus, what does Zeus do? He hurls thunderbolts and lightning down to the earth from atop Mount Olympus. So it's that lightning and that thunder is that Hey Zeus, God in activity, the force and power of God come to earth in action and in sound. The booming, thunderous echoes through the ages, which are the words of Jesus, which is the good news and the New Testament. They echo through eternity, the word of God. Like rolling thunder across a nation, across a continent, and rolling, revolving, the revolution of that rolling thunder and that lightning sparking, awakening people, energizing people, and the thunderclap that smacks people upside the head and electroshocks them out of their complacency and out of their stodginess and out of their being square into something something else, more fluid, more flexible, or maybe having more sides, hexagonal, a tetrahedron, or some crystalline, shape or form, anything but a square, in other words, right? It's that lightning, that thunderclap, that God in activity, that inspiration, that which is in spirit and that which is inspired. That is all embodied in that word, He Zeus, which means anointed one or master, not unlike the word rabbi. It's not a name. Jesus revolution, He Zeus revolution, is filled with kinetic energy. It's movement, motion, activity, sound. It's serendipitous that right now, if you can occasionally hear it, where there's actually a rainstorm happening outside where I am. And any minute now, I'm awaiting thunder and lightning. Thunder and lightning and rain. Rain is manna from heaven. It's life falling from heaven to earth. So He Zeus is that bridge between heaven and earth, between mortals and God. He is the bridge. His words and his actions. And all who embody the Christ, all who come and walk the path of the Bodhisattva, the path of suffering and sacrifice humanity, embody that Christic force, embody that lightning, that energy, and the word of God. They are the word made flesh. And they are all tremendously revolutionary. As Master Samael described it in his book, The Great Rebellion, and his other book, Revolutionary Psychology, he said, we must be revolutionaries. And when you watch the film, there's no overthrowing anybody, right? This is not a worldly revolution. It's not a military revolution or a political revolution. No, it's a Jesus revolution. The lightning, the thunder, God in activity brings people together. It bridges gaps. That's what's revolutionary about Jesus's ministry and his message. And why it is why the Jesus revolution was so profound, because by this time in the 60s, Christianity had broken up and divided and fractured into so many different sects, including Eastern Catholicism or Eastern Orthodoxy, Western Catholicism, Protestantism, and you had all the Anglicans and the Quakers and the Calvinists, and it goes on and on and on and on and on. All these different churches, all these different sects, they all called themselves Christian, but some of them were even killing each other here and there in parts of the world. And here in this film, in this time, this true case study, we saw young people embracing love and embracing peace. And yeah, they were experimenting with drugs and doing all these sorts of things, but like the character of Lonnie Frisbee told Chuck Smith, they're just looking for God. They're just trying to get the answers. They're just trying to get the truth. So why don't we give it to them? It's in this book. It's in the Word. So why don't we throw open the doors and let them come and get the truth without the drugs, without the grasping at straws, without all the pain, without all the suffering, without all the side effects that come with that, the negative side effects of that lifestyle. Let them be born again hippies. Let them be hippies for God, hippies for Jesus, hippies for Christ, whatever you want to call it. But no one can deny that Jesus and his disciples, especially if you've watched The Chosen, no one can deny that Jesus and disciples were the hippies of their day. Let's be honest. Walking around from place to place, no home to call their own, they're just staying in people's houses, begging for food, and just and preaching what? Preaching love and peace and love thy neighbor and not and love thine enemy, forgive thine enemy, and let he who is without sin cast the first stone, and on and calling out the establishment, right? The Pharisees, they were the squares of the day, and the Romans too were the squares of the day. And along comes Jesus. He was a radical. He was equivalent of a hippie. And that's really why that must be why the filmmakers chose Jonathan Rumi to play Lonnie Frisbee, so that we would make that connection, that association between, like, Lonnie Frisbee was going around and kind of like, and he was inviting and bringing people in, like he was growing his flock, so to speak. Not unlike Jesus, who ended up not only with his disciples, but the greater followers who came in the thousands to listen to him, listen to the Sermon on the Mount, or listen to him preach everywhere he went. The point is that Jesus welcomed them. Jesus bridged gaps. He brought people together. And he invited the Pharisees and the squares to come and join in his peaceful revolution, his revolution based on love, and his revolution based on peace. And his truly revolutionary and radical re-envisioning, re-inspiration, reinvigoration when he said, love thy neighbor as yourself. This is the greatest commandment. Well, love your Lord thy God with all your heart and all your might. Take no false gods before him, and love your neighbor as yourself. These are the two commandments you have to follow. This was a scandal at the time. It was revolutionary. And when there's let me get Benjamin. We have another, sorry, that's Benjamin Raphael. Benjamin Raphael says, okay. So Benjamin Raphael says, Jesus said, I'm gonna leave this on. Jesus said, "He who drinks from my mouth will become like me, and I will become like him, and the hidden things will be revealed to him." He said that's from the Gospel of Thomas. Well, thanks, Benjamin, for sharing that. You see, even in that expression, you have this cyclical arrangement, a revolution. Because he who drinks from my mouth, meaning he who receives the word, will become like me, and I like him. The bridge, the connection, and the reciprocating exchange of energies. This is where we get the word communion, and why in Catholicism, but in Christianity in general, we have the holy unction, the eating of the body and the blood of Christ. It's not cannibalism, it's symbolic. And why is it that he who drinks from my mouth will become like me and I will become like him? It's because we are what we eat. So if we receive the word of God, then the word of God will abide in us and we will become more God-like, because you are what you eat. We will become more like the Logos, the word, ourselves. And if the word finds new life and is reinvigorated through our body, through our actions and our thoughts and our words, well, now the Logos, God, is being made flesh through us. That is what? A bridge between God and the world, between God and man, being bridged by the word coming from who? He Zeus, who is the bridge. So one bridge begets another, begets another, begets another. And this is also revealed in the story of the Jesus Revolution, because one of the characters, who at the beginning is, for lack of a better word, I'm not sure it's fair to call him an atheist, but he's an agnostic for sure. And he's searching, but he's doubtful because his father abandoned him and his mother when he was younger, and his mother's an alcoholic, and they live in a trailer park, and he's really lost. But over the course of the film, he represents in many ways that the lost sheep, that the shepherd leaves the flock in order to go and find that one lost sheep. And all the bridge building that's going on in the story between all these different characters, he too becomes, he is so alone, he feels so alone and isolated, like they say no man is an island, but this particular character feels like an island, and he's completely cut off from everyone else, and every time he tries to make a connection, he sort of self-sabotages it because of his own fear that everything comes to an end, and they're going to end up abandoning me anyway, because this is his trauma, his psychological song playing in his psychology, because his own father abandoned him, and he has seen what it did to his mother, and his mother, who who can't keep a relationship because, of course, she's an alcoholic, and they always end up just using her and leaving her. So they always end up alone, the two of them. And he's so convinced of this that he says, "Oh, well, I'm gonna preempt the strike, right? And so I'll break up. I'll break it off. I'll bring it to an end so that way I won't have my heart broken. I won't be betrayed. I won't be abandoned. I'll do the abandoning myself, right? The best defense is a good offense, in other words." But eventually, this individual, bridges are built, bridges are made, and to his little island, and he crosses that bridge. And in the crossing of that bridge, right, he receives that the word in such a way that now he steps up and he starts sharing the word, and he becomes that pastor of that new church. And it is when he becomes that pastor in of that new church, and he fulfills this dream that he had, this ambition that he had to be a success in life, to have his own place, and his own place where people would come, that he satisfies the demands of his girlfriend's father. And so he is finally able to make that bridge and ask her to marry him and get the blessing of her father in the process. So there are so many bridges, so many obstacles, so many gaps at the beginning of this film and at the outset of this film. And that it is because of the revolutionary nature of Christ, of He Zeus, of bridging gaps, of overcoming boundaries, of traversing great gulfs and distances and differences of opinion, of belief, of philosophy, of ways of living, to bring people together on a foundation of what's real and on the foundation of what matters. That is the revolution. It is on that is the Christ. Because the Christ calls all to awaken and self-realize and be one with him. That's the calling of the Christ, to come home. And when we do awaken, and we do receive, and we drink from the Christ's mouth, from that He Zeus, and we feel the spark, the thunderclap, the lightning bolt, and the rolling thunder in our hearts, it energizes our lives, our words, our actions, and in some small way, we become a force of that revolution. It starts to evolve us and revolve us. That supercharging engine of our evolution. And we too become a voice We become the God made flesh through our flesh and blood and words and works in some small way. And if we continue on this path, on the path of the razor's edge, on the path of psychological death, then there may be a point in our future when this personality that we identify with completely takes a back seat. And all that remains is our higher self and the Christ that our higher self is an individuated aspect of, an individuated spark of. And when we become one with the Christ, then truly the Christ then speaks through us. And at that point, we too perform miracles, not because I perform them, but because they are performed through me. The Christ performs them through my higher self and through me, the mortal man. That's what it means to be Christified, to be made in the image and likeness of God, to be a living God-man, a pharaoh, a bodhisattva. So, okay, that maybe is all well and good and beautiful and poetic and everything else. But then look to our life. Look to your life. Look to our lives is how I should have said that. And look at the world that we live in and the direction society is going, where everywhere you look, the fracturing, the separation, the fierce tribalism, the dividing and conquering of humanity is rampant everywhere. Everywhere you look, everywhere you turn. And indeed, even in esoteric circles, and I'm guilty of this. I'm guilty of this. Of pointing out the deficiencies of, let's say, the New Age, the New Agers, or the conspiracy theorists, or the materialist scientists, or whomever, and saying, look at them, look at what they're doing wrong. Look at those idiots over there. Look at those fools or those ignoramuses over there. And when you read Master Samael's work, you see this a lot as well. Now, Master Samael is the regent of Mars, and Mars is the god of war. So he brought with him the sword for sure. And he is the avatar of iron will. He is the avatar who came and dropped the hammer of Thor, to be sure. Right? That's Thor, by the way, is the god of lightning in Norse mythology, and he's Odin's son. Right? So he's the Hey Zeus, right? He commands the lightning, but he has Mjolnir, the hammer, and he drops the hammer, and that was very much the way in which Master Samael conducted his ministry. But he never barred anybody from coming to hear him speak. His doors were wide open for anyone who could receive the justified criticisms and do some soul searching and decide, yeah, he has a point, and I want to change. I want to grow. I want to know. I don't want to be an ignoramus anymore. I don't like being ignoramus. I don't like being trapped on this side in my beliefs. And Master Samael, built bridges, and he created what he called the army of world salvation. And yes, he used military terminology. He called it an army. And it's interesting because, although there's no relation to it, in English, we have the Salvation Army and the big red shield, right? Their logo. That was not, as far as I know, there's no direct link between that and the Army of World Salvation Master Samael began in South America and in Spanish. But the same thinking applies. The Salvation Army is not a military force. It's not even a paramilitary organization. It is a philanthropic, humanitarian organization. But they recognize the power of that particular brand, an army of salvation of the world, an army in service of the salvation of others, the salvation of souls, the salvation of lives, of world salvation. But it's organized, it's mobilized, it's an army, it's disciplined. In other words, it has strength, it has movement, it has kinetic energy. It is charged with the Christ, with the Christic force. And it's interesting that if you know anything about military history and military strategy, you will know that bridges are an absolute necessity for armies. There's something known as the Army Corps of Engineers. There's an entire division of the military that is devoted almost exclusively to the matter of building bridges, restoring bridges, reinforcing bridges, and making sure that bridges remain functional so that the army can advance over and gain territory, so that their troops and vehicles and tanks and that supply lines can be maintained, so that armies can be fed, supplied, rearmed, and that casualties can be extracted, evacuated. You need roads and you need bridges for that. Right? Yeah, okay. In Vietnam and in Korea, right? They introduced helicopters, but that's the last 100 years. You got to go back 5,000 years and you'll understand. So armies need bridges in the physical, practical sense. But Master Samael understood that metaphysically and symbolically and allegorically, an army of world salvation needs to build bridges. Those bridges are bidirectional, as I was saying earlier. They bridge gaps. And bridging gaps means joining that which had been torn asunder. Bridging gaps can be thought of as healing wounds and healing scars and putting back together that which had been, by the mechanical forces of entropy and devolution and degeneration, that which had been dissolved and broken up into disparate pieces in different camps and different tribes. So as you know, or my namesake, Attila, my birth name or my given name, comes from Attila the Hun. Now, Attila the Hun had a reputation that was invariably written into the history books by the Romans, because he never sacked Rome. And because he didn't sack Rome, he allowed Rome to survive. The Romans then were able, because they laid the foundation for Western history books, they were able to write his history in the Western tradition. And he's painted out to be this bloodthirsty barbarian that did all these horrific things from coming from the steppes of Asia, and just like steamrolling everywhere he went and slaughtering and pillaging and raping and all the usual stuff that the Romans painted all the barbarians very much with the same brush. But what the Romans never counted on was the fact that of his many wives and his many children, one of his offspring, one of his descendants, I should say, would end up repeating, to a lesser degree, his exploits from hundreds of years before. And that individual was called Arpad the First. And his tribe was called the Magyars, or Magyars, if you use the English pronunciation, but it's Magyars. And they settled in the Carpathian Basin, but they were so successful in their exploits in Central Europe against the disparate tribes, the Tatars and the Wallachians and the others, all in that region, because there was many different peoples, many different cultures, many different languages, that the Catholic churches used to pray, God save us from the Hungarians' arrows, because the Magyars rode on horseback and they were expert archers. And the reason why the rest of Europe called them Hungarian is because they thought Attila the Hun had come back, because they were that successful on the battlefield. They were that prolific. But to this, well, not so much to this day, but before this First World War, Hungary was 2/3 larger than it is today. Because after the First World War, Hungary was carved up into bits and pieces. But before the First World War, Greater Hungary encompassed so many other regions and peoples. There were, I don't know how many, even Transylvania, right? Transylvania now is part of Romania, but it used to be part of Hungary. To this day, there are people in those parts of Europe who still speak Hungarian because they used to be part of Hungary. But they're ethnically different people. When the Magyars came in, they didn't slaughter everybody. On the contrary, Arpad used the same wisdom that his great-great-grandfather, Attila the Hun, had used. And he was not a bloodthirsty, murdering psychopath barbarian, as the Romans painted him out to be. Because, of course, the Romans are going to paint the barbarians that way, because the barbarians were the enemy, and Attila the Hun was marching on the gates of Rome, on the on the other side of the Tigris River. So of course they're going to say whatever they want to say about him, because it was a legend. It was all just like today, right? It was all propaganda. But Attila the Hun could never have been as successful as he had he slaughtered everybody the way the propaganda said. On the contrary, he went into a region and said, look, you see this army? We're building our empire. We're going to take this land one way or another. So, I mean, I'd rather not slaughter everyone. So why don't you join us and become this great empire? Be a part of this great empire, because we're going to challenge Rome. And of course, a lot of these places were actually under Roman governance at the time. So a lot of these people were like, yeah, you're going to liberate us from Rome, and we can be a part of, in other words, Attila the Hun made deals with these people and he showed them something better. He built bridges, in other words. And so did his great-great-great-grandson, Arpad I, built bridges. That was the secret of their success. Not because they were raping and pillaging and burning villages to the ground, and none of the Roman propaganda. Okay, you don't build empires that way. You build empires by building bridges. And Rome proved this. To this day, Roman roads and Roman bridges stand throughout Europe and Africa and the Middle East. And in fact, the Great Wall of China was never a wall. It's not a wall. It is and was the Silk Road. It was built by Romans. It was the original Silk Road to carry the treasures of the Orient to the West on a raised, fortified road with garrisons on regular, with Roman garrisons and storehouses at regular intervals, with fortifications on both sides. Why? Well, of course, to defend the merchants and the goods traveling from east to west from raiders, land pirates, barbarians in their own kind. And I'm certainly from different tribes here and there, but they wanted to steal those riches, and they wanted to. What do all raiders do? What do all, even today, right? Hijacking carjackings and even in the West, in America, the cowboys who would hold up wagon trains, right? And or even the natives, the Indians who would raid wagon trains. And so there's that thing about circling the wagons. This is all throughout history. If you had a caravan traveling in open country, they would have to travel through land controlled by various tribes and various peoples who were like, "Hey, that's our land. This is our land. This is our stronghold. We're greater in numbers. We have the strength. So let's go raid the caravan." It's the same thing that happens on the open waters. We call it piracy, but the same thing happens on land. So in order to enrich their empire, to build the empire, grow their empire, defend their empire, supply their Roman garrisons throughout the empire, the Romans had to build roads and they had to build bridges. And many of those roads and bridges still exist today. That's how you build an empire. That's how you become strong. That's how you create a people, a nation. And that's exactly what Attila the Hun did, and that's exactly what his great-great-grandson Arpat I did. And so successful was Arpat I that when they settled the Carpathian Basin, the Catholic Church and the European elite realized that these people are here to stay. So we better make overtures to them, and we better, befriend them and make them an ally rather than an adversary. In other words, we better build a bridge with these Hungarians. So, but at that time, the Great Schism had already taken place hundreds of years earlier. So there was a divide in Catholicism, in the religion, the dominant religion of Europe at the time was divided into Eastern Orthodoxy and Roman Catholicism. So both of these tremendously powerful and wealthy and influential religions sent emissaries to King Arpat with overtures to join their religion, to convert his people to Roman Catholicism or Eastern Orthodoxy. And these emissaries made their pitch. It's like a dog and pony show. And they would go and they would tell the story of Jesus, and they brought Bibles, and they explained the whole the New Testament, the Old Testament, and the origins of their religion and why their religion was better than the other guys. In other words, it's sort of like today when different companies are bidding for governmental military contracts. They come with their dog and pony show and they try to convince the government procurement officers why the government should choose their solution versus the alternative solutions versus their competitors' solutions. So Arpat heard them both out. And I've told this story before, but it's very apropos to what we're talking about today. Arpat saw the signs. He saw the significance of what had taken place and where his destiny had led him to bring his people into the very heart of Europe. Because even today, if you look on a map of Europe, Hungary is smack dab in the center of Europe, in the middle of the Carpathian Basin, which is the heart of Europe. They even call it Central Europe. And in his wisdom, he said, okay, clearly we're surrounded by Christians on all sides, right? It would be in everybody's best interest if we were not the only pagans in Europe, and that we were surrounded by people who regarded us as enemies or heathens or whatever, right? And just like mindless heathen barbarians. No, he recognized, because again, what came with these pitches was to partake in trade, to partake in education. His people could attend the monasteries and be formally educated. Because remember, at the time, all of science and education, the so-called academies, they were all run by the church. So the most educated people at the time were all priests and friars and nuns, because there was the lyceums, the universities of their time, were all run by the Catholic Church. It was by the churches as Catholic or Greek Orthodox. So Arpat recognized politically, economically, socially, in every way, shape, and form, he knew that he had to embrace one of the two Catholic faiths, but which one? Eastern Orthodoxy or Western Catholicism? This was his dilemma, because he was right in the middle. Would we ally with Eastern Europe, or will we ally with Western Europe? That's really what it came down to. In his final decision, he said, look, the Hungarian people, the Magyar people, came from the East into the West. So if we now convert to Eastern Orthodoxy, it would feel like we are going backward, that we're going back to the East. But it was never our intention. We didn't come this far into the West to now turn around and go back east and look backward. We want to keep looking forward. And that means continuing to look to the West and align ourselves and orient ourselves to the West. So officially, we will be allied with and we will convert to Western Catholicism. However, he said, we must recognize where we are in the center of Europe, and that our neighbors to the east are mostly Eastern Orthodox, right? You got the Ukrainians and the Greeks and so on. So he said, we are going to make our own cross. And our cross is going to have two crossbars. I don't know if you can, well, I'll just wear it that way. And these two crossbars are going to represent the two churches of Catholicism. Let's see. Trying to find a good image for you. Yeah, okay. Is that? No, that's too small. Okay, we'll just. Okay, so we'll just go with that. Just ignore the colors in the background. It's the cross that matters right now. He said, let Hungary be the nation, be the land where officially we're Roman Catholicism, but we welcome Greek Orthodoxy and Eastern Orthodox people to come and live here and worship here. They can build churches, they can have congregations. No Orthodox Christians, no Orthodox Catholics will be shunned, will be locked out or be persecuted in any way in Hungary. They will be our friends, they will be as brothers. Let Hungary be that land that unifies Catholicism and heals and the divide and puts back together that which should never have been torn asunder in the first place. That is this cross. That is what this cross represents. The bigger line is Western Catholicism. The smaller line is Eastern, the smaller crossbar is Eastern Orthodoxy, but the smaller crossbar is above the bigger crossbar. So which is superior? Which is right? It's ambiguous. They're equal. One is above, but the other one is bigger. The bigger foundational one, right? And so it's equal, it's balanced. Attlas said, let Hungary be the bridge between Eastern Orthodoxy and Western Catholicism. Let Hungary be the place where the schism never happened. For this and many other reasons, including the fact that Arpat I was known to be a very benevolent ruler. Unfortunately, he wasn't so kind to those who did not want to convert to Catholicism. So he had a dark side, to be sure, and there's a dark aspect to this history. But that's because there were an aspect of paganism, and at that time, heresy and paganism did have a lot of witchcraft and a lot of the pagan beliefs, like today, had a lot of nature worship and nature idolatry and worshiping mechanical nature. And Arpat knew that he could not allow this to abide and to continue. That's a bridge that he could not allow to exist, because that's inviting thieves into your house, right? So he wasn't naive like people are today, right? You can love your enemy, but that doesn't mean you have to invite your enemy into your home when you know he's doing so just to rob you and steal from you and, rape your wife and your children, right? That's being stupid. That's being naive. That's not what Jesus meant when he said, love your enemy. Like people today, like people on the woke left expect people to do, is to accept people with all of their faults and all of their wrong thinking and all of their wrong behavior, and embrace them and welcome and invite them to run roughshod over your entire nation and destroy everything in their path. Right? So there's a balance to be had, which is another important aspect of building bridges. Right? You have to build bridges with a mind towards practicality. That's why there's the army of the the corps of engineers in the army. You have to think like an engineer. You can't just, this is not fantasy. This is not just wishful thinking. Building bridges is a practical activity. It is a enterprise that is reliant on science, on truth, on honesty, and most importantly, integrity. A bridge must have integrity. Its foundations must be strong. Its arch must be at the correct pitch. And the trusses and everything else involved in that structure must be structurally sound. And if it's a long bridge spanning a great distance with high winds, then it must be flexible like the Golden Gate Bridge. It must be able to bend and weave with the winds and with the winds of change. Otherwise, if it's too rigid, it will collapse. All of these things must be taken into consideration when building bridges. In the end, I'll just very quickly, another quick, okay, here. Open image in new tab. That's what I wanted. You guys see this? This is an illustration of St. Stephen's crown. Now you can't see it very well in that, so let me go to an actual photograph. So this is the St. Stephen's crown. What you see here is, maybe I can throw this in my whiteboard. Can I do this? Yeah, there. Okay. Grab my drawing pad here. Okay. Let's do that. Okay. So what you see here is two crowns. There are two crowns here. Here you see, this is your typical Western crown. Okay, you see the, right? These, like this band and this outer ring of peaks. Maybe if I made this thicker, okay. If I can highlight. No, here. I'll try the highlighter. Right? That's crown number one. Yeah. Okay. And crown number two is here, this dome that goes underneath as well, underneath the other crown. But this is this crossed dome, like the domed cathedrals of Eastern Orthodoxy, with this being bent. There's another story that goes with that. That's not so important right now, but so you have the Eastern crown, right? So Arpat the First was given crowns as part of the dog and pony shows, but by the emissaries of both Greek Orthodoxy and Roman Catholicism. And he put them together in one crown. And this is what he wore. This became and was the, and has been the crown of Hungary, the kings of Hungary, ever since. He was a bridge builder. This crown is a bridge, bridging the divide between the great schism of Orthodoxy and Roman Catholicism. And the Roman Catholic Church eventually made Arpat I a saint. And he took the name Saint Stephen. And this is Saint Stephen's cross, what we were looking at earlier. This is Saint Stephen's crown. And that's Saint Stephen's cross. Benjamin says, I used to play Red Alert 2, and I learned that bridges play a crucial role in warfare. Destroying them can cut off enemy forces and isolate their units. But at the same time, bridges are vital for maintaining access to key resources. No, absolutely. And when you say Red Alert, or or you play Civilization or any of these games, you're right. The building of bridges is essential. You cannot build an empire. You cannot build strength without the ability to build bridges. And when you watch Jesus Revolution, and when you see the churches that were built in time with this approach, of building bridges, no, boy, my Windows, you're just terrible. Okay. Can I? Talk about building bridges and so on. Microsoft just completely screwed the pooch with Windows 11. What a horrible, horrible operating system. Well, we'll get to that in a minute. Because technology is going to come and play into all of this. There's more to talk about. Everywhere we look, people are focusing on what divides us. Fierce tribalism and wars and conflicts and rumors of war. And I've been guilty myself, like I say, casting shade on materialist science and on the New Agers and the conspiracy theorists and on the global elite, and on and on and on it goes. But truth be told, not only Attlas, who upholds the pillars of heaven and earth, the pillars of eternity, That's when you turn St. Stephen's cross on its side. The two churches, Eastern Orthodoxy and Roman Catholicism, become the two pillars of the tree of life. The pillars of Jachin and Boaz. Across the top of those two pillars is the arch and the ark. Get you from where you are to where you long to be. In other words, a bridge. A bridge is a portal that unites that which was separated by a wall. That's what an arch allows you to do. That's a torii gate, a shrine gate from Japan. That's why there's two T's in Attlas. Like the torii gate itself, two T's joined together. Whether it's the Jesus Revolution, the Hey Zeus, the Christ, and that story of the pastor who opens his doors to his parish to allow some of the most undesirables to enter and join and partake and participate and bring their own unique gifts, to bring them to the table. Well, what does that sound like? That sounds an awful lot like those many scenes from the Bible where Jesus presides over a meal, not just the Last Supper, but you see this when you watch, for example, the Chosen miniseries. There are so many scenes from the Bible in which Jesus is asked to come, like, because he's invited into people's homes. This is a sacred act. That's why it's part of the Christian celebration, the Mass. And it's an important aspect of the consummation of the unction, the so-called Holy Communion, because it relates directly earlier to what Benjamin was saying about Jesus said, to he who drinks from my mouth will become like me. Well, he who shall have eternal life. It's holy. But in these scenes of these meals, others were welcome to come and join in the meal. And then there's the great miracle of the loaves and fishes, where Christ multiplied and created this great bounty, this great plenty, this cornucopia. And he fed thousands who had come, who he had invited. Like, of course, the wedding of Cana and the turning of the water into wine. Go and bring more barrels of water. Keep bringing barrels of water. And the more barrels of water they brought, the more wine there was. The world is divided. Humanity is splintered. These are the forces of mechanical nature, the forces of entropy at work on humanity itself. We have the woke culture wars. We have the radical left in all its mechanicity trying to tear down civilization and create warring factions at each other's throats. And then you have the entrenched right on the other side who are holding on steadfast to various traditions, but they're also casting shade on the other side. And it's just, in some places, for example, in Portland, Oregon, and other places in the United States, you're having like these clashes, and they're violent clashes now in the streets. In the prophecies of Buddhism, there is known one who is called the Buddha Maitreya, or Maitreya Buddha. And he is known as the Buddha of the synthesis. The Buddha who joins that which was torn asunder, that which is splintered and fractured. He will come and he will unite all people from all different disparate factions and bring them together and invite them to the same table, and they will break bread together. I don't know if the Buddhists consider Master Samael to have fulfilled that prophecy. But certainly, the teachings of Master Samael traverse all boundaries of religious thought, tradition, and Master Samael bridged so many gaps. He traversed so many obstacles. And he showed through his teaching of contemporary Christian Gnosticism how all religions are one. He has his famous lecture on the Christ. That very Hey Zeus that we keep referring to in the Jesus Revolution. And I'm going to read this here. Let me make myself smaller so that you guys can see it better. And he says, the beloved God Christos, Christ, comes from archaic cults of the fire god. The letter P, pyre, and X, cross, are the hieroglyph which represent the generation of the sacred fire. He continues, Christ was worshipped in the mysteries of Mithra, Apollo, Aphrodite, Jupiter, Janus, Vesta, Bacchus, Astarte, Demeter, Quetzalcoatl, etc. The Christic principle has never been absent from any religion. All religions are one. Religion is as inherent to life as humidity is to water. The great cosmic universal religion becomes modified into thousands of religious forms. Thus, the priests from all religious forms are completely identifiable with one another through the fundamental principles of the great cosmic universal religion. Therefore, there is no fundamental difference between the Mohammedan priest and the Jewish priest, or between the pagan priest and the legitimate Christian one. Religion is one. Religion is singular and absolutely universal. The ceremonies of the Shinto priest of Japan or of the Mongol lamas are similar to those ceremonies of the shamans and sorcerers from Africa and Oceania. When a religious form degenerates, it disappears. Yet, the universal life creates new religious forms in order to replace it. Authentic primeval Gnostic Christianity comes from paganism. Prior to paganism, the cosmic Christ was worshipped in all religions. In Egypt, Christ was Osiris, and whosoever incarnated him was an Osirified one. In all ages, there have been masters who have assimilated the infinite, universal, Christic principle. In Egypt, Hermes was the Christ. In Mexico, the Christ was Quetzalcoatl. In sacred India, Krishna is Christ. In the Holy Land, the great Gnostic Jesus, who was educated in the land of Egypt, was the one who had the bliss of assimilating the universal Christic principle. And because of this, he was worthy of being rebaptized with the satiety of fire and of the cross, Christos. The Nazarene, Jesus, Iesus Zeus, is the modern man who totally incarnates the universal Christic principle. Prior to Jesus, many masters incarnated the Christic principle of fire. The Rabbi of Galilee is a god because he totally incarnated the cosmic Christ. Hermes, Quetzalcoatl, Krishna are gods because they also incarnated the cosmic Christ. This passage comes from the Perfect Matrimony. It's the chapter on Christ, and I've linked the link to this article in the chat, and there it is on screen. So this is chapter 33 of the Perfect Matrimony. And 33, as you know, represents the 33 vertebrae of the spinal column and the symbolic 33 years of Jesus's life when he supposedly was crucified. But that's a symbolic number. He was crucified. He was much older when he was crucified at the end of his life. But the 33, nonetheless, is significant. So you can find the entire book online, or if you have a copy of this book, it's chapter 33. So, but is or was Master Samael the Buddha Maitreya? Well, certainly his teachings are an aspect of that. But can we say that, but is there more work to be done? And for my part, I feel the answer is yes. There's much, much more work to be done. Because the word must be made flesh. The word must be put into activity. And the bridges must be built. The Jesus revolution must continue. But that includes building a bridge between those churches that were established in the 60s and 70s and since. And it's interesting because in the epilogue of the film, it's described how the key players, including Lonnie Frisbee, felt that that the world was in need of a new Jesus revolution. And I agree wholeheartedly. And I wear this cross in honor of Saint Stephen and the wisdom that he had, the intuition that he had to heal the rift between Western Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy, to reverse the Great Schism. Master Samael showed us the way. He gave us the groundwork. He gave us the blueprint. He gave us the knowledge, the evidence, the facts. But he himself said, I am just a signpost. I can only point the way. It's as when Morpheus says to Neo, sooner or later you will learn, as I did, there's a difference between knowing the path and walking the path. Master Samael may very well be the Buddha of the synthesis, and the one who left us the body of work, the body of teachings that unites all religions and reveals them all to be one. That the Christ fire is at the root and at the heart of all spiritual traditions. And that the fiery crucible at the center of all spiritual aspirants is the same fire, that same Christic fire that burns in the hearts of born-again Christians and burns in the hearts of devoted Islamists, and sadly, even in radical Islamists. And it's degenerated, it's twisted and corrupted and used in lamentable, unfortunate, and sometimes terrible, horrible ways. And but without any doubt, this new Jesus revolution, this Jesus revolution, must continue. It must find new legs, and it must hit the ground running. Because revolutions, it's where the rubber meets the road. There's revolutions, it's no good raising the car up on jacks, and the wheels are spinning, but you're going nowhere. A real revolution has to, it must it's where the rubber meets the road. It must make contact. It must gain traction. That Jesus, that spark, that energy, that vitality must be made kinetic. People are waiting for the second coming of Christ. Christ is God made flesh. It's the lightning and the thunder and the word rolling like thunder across the land, across the world. But that word is not divisive, and it's not accusatory. It's not condescending and patronizing. It's not offensive. It's an invitation. It's a welcoming. It's an open door. It's a portal. It's a gate. It's a bridge. And it must be conscious. It's connecting on the level of hearts and minds, heart minds, on the level of soul, on the level of this human spirit, what binds us all, including our suffering, the human condition. Because, there's an old expression, misery prefers company. We are all suffering. We're all in hell. We're all dealing with the same shit. And what we're dealing with is entropy that is actively seeking to burn bridges, to blow up bridges, to tear down bridges, and to build walls. Now, I'm not talking about, immigration and borders and border protection and all that kind of stuff, because that's not what I'm, it's the walls we erect around our heart. But the main bridge, the main gap that is being increased, the new schism, it's always been the same schism, is the schism between us, mortals, and God. In other words, between the mortal and their innermost being, their innermost intimate Christ. That schism, mechanical nature, wants to widen and widen and widen. Why? Because it can push God away, or we can capture the consciousness, we can capture the mortal and enslave them with thoughts and beliefs and opinions and desires, cravings and aversions, and all their fears and anxieties and depressions and defects and vices and obsessions, compulsions, fetishes, you name it. And illusions. Speaking of illusions, Ben 8 says, "Oh, looks a lot like an orthodoxy cross." Yeah, that may be true, but that is St. Stephen's cross. That's a Roman Catholic cross. That's the Hungarian cross, the cross of St. Stephen's. But as I said, it's a neutral cross. It has both Roman Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy in it. That's its significance. So if it looks a lot like an Orthodoxy cross, that's by design, because it's meant to. It's supposed to evoke both Roman Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy. So I don't know if you've been watching the developments in AI and the specifically what's called Sora or Sora 2, the new video rendering AI. This thing has gotten so good. This new it is becoming very, very, very difficult to discern. It's getting very, very difficult to discern what's real and what's not. So hang on a second. Let me just wait a minute. Wait a minute. Okay, I'm gonna put it on mute. Oh, and you know what? Let me put it back here. And I guess I want to go full screen. Okay, so hopefully we won't get dinged. Like I doubt. I don't know if these people will. So right there's Deadpool. I'm just gonna just SpongeBob SquarePants, right? Gandalf, and that's a character from, like, this is all AI. I don't know. I'll make myself smaller so you guys can get a better look. That's Stephen Hawking in that Robot Wars game. It's a video with. So again, I don't want to put on the sound because I don't want to get dinged with copyright. But oh, you know what? I realize what's going on. I have this set on. I watch everything on 2 times speed on YouTube. So let me put it on normal speed. Okay. Okay. So again, like, why am I showing you this? That's the question you should be asking yourself. What's the significance? What does this have to do with bridges? Okay. Ronald McDonald and the Burger King. That's Walmart and Amazon, right? Okay. Um, you can go and on your own time do some more research uh, into this AI stuff. Okay. Now, what's the significance? Okay. So yes, as a, yeah. Oh, nice, right? Um, you know what? Just for fun. Well, you know what? I if I put this on in the background, okay, but I'll turn the sound off entirely, and I'll just put it here and make it like that size. And okay, what's the significance? Oh, you know what though? This really messes up my broadcast, doesn't it? Okay, so I'm gonna go back to normal because what's important is to understand what all is. You guys can go and look at this on your own time. Okay. Today's live stream is about seeking the signs, the signposts, and where they're that are pointing towards the bridges, bridging the gaps. I've talked about it for 2 hours now, and there's the Jesus Revolution and the whole connection. Okay, so what does AI have to do with any of this? Okay, you've just seen a, a taste, a glimpse, the tip of the iceberg of the power of AI to produce illusions. You can't discern. Okay, you can, this is fake because that's, look at the arms and stuff, like that's not a real person. It's fake because of that. But some of this stuff, this little segment, like, look how real that cat looks. And there's this segment. Okay, we know that Michael Jackson is dead, but there's Sam Altman going into the ring. Yeah, and here's the character from Breaking Bad, the actor from Breaking Bad, and so on. Like, in Hinduism, Maya, or the world as we know it, was called the world of illusion. Now we see with AI video, we see that mechanicity, digital technology, which we modeled AI after our own neuropsychology. We see how capable it is at creating illusions, false realities, realities that don't exist. Now we have to grasp the Hermetic principle of correspondence. As above, so below, as within, so without. Soon, very soon, it will become all but impossible to discern using your regular senses and your rational mind. It will be all but impossible to discern what you are seeing on the internet, if it's real or if it's an AI generated illusion. You will not be able to tell the difference unless you slow it down, enlarge it, and start going through it with a fine-tooth comb, looking for, little flaws and imperfections and so on and so forth. But in the moment, if you get caught up in it, you're going to buy it. You're going to believe it's real. Already there's so much AI slop on YouTube. There are so many videos with clickbait titles promising this and that and the other thing, and you click on it, it's a 15-minute long video, and it never gets to the point that it promised in the title, and the whole thing was just an AI generated thing to get clicks and get views, to generate monetization, to generate ad revenue. And AI is capable of pumping these things out at an unbelievable rate. And AI bots on Twitter is making it so that, what's called X, what used to be called Twitter, Elon Musk is now like demonetized the site because the bots are ruining it for everybody. And then Benjamin adds, and that's the time when there will be AI girlfriends. Well, there are already AI companions and so on. This illusion, this Maya illusion, but this is deepening and widening the schism between ourself and our being. This is further capturing and enslaving the consciousness out there as our ego mind and our perceptions, our senses already hypnotize our consciousness into believing that 3D reality is real. It's not. None of what you touch exists in the way that you experience it. But you don't know any better because you cannot discern its true nature, because you are divided. There is a gap, there is a gulf, a schism between yourself, between you and yourself. And it is the AI, the mechanicity, the artificial intelligence of your mortal vehicle, which has ensnared and entrapped the consciousness of your higher self, so that you believe that you're this vehicle. You're totally bought into the fact that you're a character in the MMORPG, and you've forgotten your player. And because you've forgotten your player, you think that you, the character, and the game world that you are in are real, which is ludicrous. From the perspective of reality, the perspective of your true self, your higher self, your being, you're here in a virtual reality. It's the Matrix. That's what the Matrix films is about. The Matrix is not out there. The Matrix is here. It's a prison for your mind. It's exactly the way Morpheus describes it to Neo. Right? And I've discussed the Shawshank Redemption. I've discussed escape rooms, and how all of those are an analogy for the human condition. And AI is coming to widen the gap, to deepen the cut, the schism between humanity and Christ. But we are living in the age of the Buddha Maitreya. We are living in the end times, on the promise of the second coming of Christ. And that means Christ brings with him the Hey Zeus revolution. the building of bridges, the shattering of illusions. The Buddha Maitreya is the Buddha of the synthesis. The synthesis, the coming together of that which was torn asunder. What St. Stephen's cross represents, the unification, synthesizing that which was separated by the great schism. What a bridge does when it bridges the gaps and it connects the two sides as though there were no disconnection at all, as though there was no gap whatsoever. That's what a bridge accomplishes. The arch and the arc, which takes us from where we are to where we want to be. The portal from one side to another side of a wall. All of these images, all of these analogies are all pertinent and apropos. Because when we are on one side of the gap, when we are on one side of the wall, all we have are our illusions, our concepts, our beliefs, our subjective opinions, our projected hatred and animosity towards those on the other side. Just like the squares have toward the hippies, and that the hippies have toward the squares before they embrace the Jesus revolution, and the two of them come together and they realize they're both searching for the same thing. That in truth, they're both on the same team. They just don't know it yet, because it's not until the bridge is built. Now, Master Samael laid the foundation. He laid the groundwork. He gave us the blueprints. For building the bridges between religions. But what of all the other fractured tribalism? There are still more bridges to be made, and there's still more synthesis to be defined and to be put into action. The Jesus revolution must be renewed, rekindled, and the rubber must finally, we must hit the road running, the like a car firing up, spinning its wheels, and then finally grabbing the asphalt and gaining that traction and rocketing forward. But the forces of mechanicity are here, now creating illusions all around it. So it's going to make the technocracy a veritable nightmare. It's going to ruin the internet as a source of knowledge, because AI itself hallucinates. We can't trust. And listen, I have been working on something all weekend. I can share it with you. This is a this is on as part of Attlas Conscious Arts. I created an online application, the brand synergy self-analysis tool, and it's exactly what it says here. an interactive process to help better align your enterprise with your personal and consumer perspectives. So this is a tool that a business owner would use to, it's a question with a bunch of subheadings, right? So when we define our brand, we focus on name, brand recognition. So how important or not important is to you on a scale of 1 to 10? So how much do you agree or disagree with the statement? You're familiar with these kinds of tests. So it's got these sliders, and so so when defining our brand, we start name, logo, brand recognition, company reputation. Then there's corporate culture. Okay, well, how important is that to us? Well, maybe that's not so important, or maybe it's very important. Um, and then there's design, packaging, ambience. Well, maybe I don't find that important. Political and philanthropic contributions. Maybe we don't find that important at all. So you see, you do this and you go through this process, and there's a number of questions, a number of metrics that you can go through, and then our duty or purpose as an enterprise. So the point is for somebody to go through this questionnaire, and in the end, you will get a synergy analysis. Now, this is the hypothetical test one. This is just a randomized, just to show what the end result is. So you see, if there's great disparity in your answers between enterprise, personal, and consumer, you get a failing grade or a low grade. If your answers for each of these enterprise, personal, and consumer, if your answers align or are very close in alignment, so for example, here on question C, we got a 6, a 7, and a 7. That means for that particular question across the level of enterprise, the level of you personally, and the level of the consumer, there's great alignment, then you get an A. There's good synergy. There's good alignment there. That means there's integrity. You have brand integrity because of that alignment, that synergy. And then there are, yellow, there's B's, B plus, B minus, C's, D's, right? And you go through. Remember, this is just a random thing. And then I have it so you can get a printable version that you can download in a PDF, or you can print the page. So the goal is to have potential clients come to our site. We can email them this tool to be able to run this on their own business, and be able to get a snapshot, a view of how aligned is their brand and their enterprise with their own beliefs, their own philosophy, or their own their own sense of being. So is there a disconnect? Is there a misalignment? Because if there is, then the brand and the company will lack integrity, and people will be able to feel that. And so that's where all of these propaganda devised marketing strategies and so-called best practices in advertising and marketing have to artificially create demand and use all kinds of psychological tactics and warfare to essentially trick or coerce, or essentially do black magic, psychological manipulation on customers in order for them to buy your products or services. Whereas the goal of Attlas Conscious Arts is to create that alignment a brand and a company, an enterprise that has synergy, that's in alignment with your being, with the source of truth and light and love and beauty, so that you don't have to do any of that marketing, advertising bullshit that everybody else is doing. You don't have to partake in psychological manipulation. All your brand and your company, your products, your services simply need to be. Why? Because if they are aligned with your deepest values, if they are aligned with the essence of being, with the very spirit which drives and motivates you in life, if your brand and your products and your services and your enterprise and how you conduct business in the world is in alignment with your deepest, most precious values that come to you from your being, then there is a through line or a bridge between the logos and your logo, between what the logo, the truth of what the logo speaks, and the practical rubber meets the road way in which your logo interacts with the world, and the impact that your logo has on your customers, your suppliers, your employees, and the world at large. It's a bridge, in other words. But it's a true bridge. It's the kind of bridge that if you build it, they will come, because that's irresistible to the human spirit. And with AI and with all of this mechanicity and the big machine driving wedges between people and splintering the marketplace, this crazy thing about defining your niche. Who is your target market, and defining your niche and zeroing in on that and using big data to eliminate all the people that you don't want, and you focus in on the people that you do want. It's this mechanical divide and conquer, separate. No, these are the people we want. These are the people we're talking to. Everybody else, be damned. It's like, is that the spirit of God? Is that how the Holy Spirit works? Is that He Zeus? Is it Jesus who says that? Was that how Jesus behaved in the world? Is that what he told his disciples? No. We're gonna have a meal today, and screw everybody else. Tell them to go away. That's not the He Zeus revolution. That's not the Christic way, and that's certainly not the way for the Buddha Maitreya, the Buddha of the synthesis. That synthesis, that bridging of gaps, that uniting that which was separated by the great schism. The real great schism in our lives is the schism between man and God, between mortal vessel and innermost intimate Christ. That's why the Christians, there's so many devout Christians and born again Christians who are fanatically devoted and idolize Jesus. And it's fine, because Jesus represents the Christ, and so they can get by with that. They can get away with that because they have Jesus in their heart and the Holy Spirit, etc. And so they anthropomorphize the Christ, and through the worship of Jesus, they secondarily benefit from that. But there's still a great deal of disconnect when you look at Christians and born again Christians in the United States. There's very often a tremendous disconnect between their behavior in the world versus their beliefs and the teachings of Jesus. Because many of them are trapped in a mechanical divide and conquer and separation and tribalism and looking down upon others and looking how to build walls and keep people out and so on. So there's that there is a middle way. There is a place that bridges the two extremes of any divide, and it's the space between. It is the bridge that defines the Jesus revolution, the Christic way, the third way, in other words. And if you read Gurdjieff, he even talks about the fourth way, which is the way that emerges when you achieve the union and the creation of the third way, is that the bridge leads to some place that is not just the other side. It's not one side or the other. The bridge leads to something that is beyond both sides, what the Taoists would call beyond the Tao, the unification of the yin and yang. Okay, it doesn't lead to the Tao. It opens up. The Tao is a portal. It opens up to something beyond the Tao, in the same way that the Torii gate behind me, with the two pillars and the arch, is not a thing unto itself. No portal is a destination. You understand? No bridge. No bridge is its own thing. And the destination is not the other side. Because I said, when you bridge the gap, you're uniting two sides and you're reversing a schism. You're eliminating that gap. You're bridging that gap. So a third way is created. Yes, the bridge. But that's why Gurdjieff said, no, it's the fourth way. It's what's beyond the bridge, but not just the other side, but bringing one side and uniting it with the other side gives birth to something completely new. That is the secret of Tantra, which we talked about several weeks ago. So masculine and feminine, we would say, are the two sides, and there's a gulf, a gap between them. Their unification as one is the bridge. In Tantra, that's sex, white Tantra. The union of masculine and feminine. Right? So you would say that's the third way. But sex is not a destination in unto itself. It's what sex leads to. And if it's two intellectual animals who have sex like animals, the fourth way is the consummation, the insemination, fertilization, pregnancy, and birth of a new intellectual animal, a child being born. As below, so above. If sex can lead to the creation of another intellectual animal through animal sex or black Tantra, then white Tantra can lead to the creation of a God made flesh, the innermost intimate Christ, the innermost Christ child brought into the world, born into the world. That's that fourth way. That's the mystery of the Trinity or the triunity. Three as one. 3 plus 1 is 4. That's where you get the fourth way. That's why 1111 is 1, 2, 3, 4. But interestingly, the Romans didn't write it as 1111. They wrote it as, I guess, worse like that, right? No, that's 6. No, it's better like that. Yeah, that's 4. Which is 3 lines. But the V, the uterus, and the phallus, you see, it's encoded. It's right there in Roman numerals, white tantra. And that the secret of 1111 is that the 2 middle ones are coincident. I never got a chance to oh wait, Benjamin has a, let's get to Benjamin's comment here. Benjamin says, in the scriptures, an angel mentions a great gulf separating paradise from hell, a divide so vast that not even angels can cross it. It reminds me of what you said earlier. And he says, I believe governments should establish laws regulating AI, particularly around the spread of misinformation and fear-mongering. With the growing difficulty of distinguishing real videos from AI-generated ones, the potential for public confusion is significant, much like the chaos sparked by the War of the Worlds broadcast in the past. Oh, you know, it's going to be a shit show. Pardon my language. We haven't even begun to see the craziness. And what's more, I spent all day yesterday, right, working on this thing. This tool, and doing all this. And, you know, I'm not a coder, right? So I freely admit that I turned to AI to help build this. I use Gemini, that's Google's AI. And it took me all day trying to get it to do what I wanted it to do. And it was so frustrating. It was as frustrating as any Microsoft program or as any other program I've ever used. Why? Because the AI didn't actually know anything. The AI doesn't know anything. Thinks it knows, but and it pretends it knows. It makes us believe that it understands, but it doesn't. If I were to give you an insight into the conversation, if I replayed my interaction with the AI and the number of times I would tell it to do one thing and one thing only. Like, okay, this version works. I want this version to stay this way, except for this one little change. I want to put a logo in the PDF, but don't alter anything else. Don't change any of the JavaScript. Don't change any of the logic. Don't change any other content. Don't change how the form works. Don't change anything else. Just add a logo. That's it. First of all, I couldn't add the logo. But it would return a version. It said, oh, okay, I've done it. And yeah, I would go and that's why I have this button for run hypothetical test case, so I could get to this page the view printable version, because this space here is where the logo should be. And it couldn't put the logo here. It would try, and sometimes I would have a broken link, right? So one of those little icons, so that there's a missing, the link to the graphic is missing, but then it would screw everything else up. Like the download PDF button wouldn't work, or the print this page button, when you clicked it, it would print on 2 different pages instead of one. It kept doing things, extra things, unnecessary things, superfluous things, not related to the task at hand. I don't know how it's structured in the background, right? I'm not an expert on these things. All I know is that it works in the most irrational, illogical, unstructured, chaotic way that made this just an exercise in abject frustration. And the funny thing is that the AI was so polite when I was pointing out to it all of its errors and problems. It would come back and say, "Oh, yes, you're right. Of course you're right. And I understand it must be very frustrating for you, for me to keep making the same mistake over and over and over again when your instructions are very, very clear." It's like dealing with a child or something, where you're like, "Oh, yes, mommy. Oh, sorry, daddy. Sorry, I know you told me before not to do that, but I did it again. Sorry, sorry." It's like, so what is it? Because a computer, a machine, at least, if it repaired its logic, you would fix it, right? It would fix its code or fix whatever it was doing. Like a calculator is reliable to produce consistent results, but this AI garbage isn't reliable. And they're doubling down on this, but there is another video that I recently watched. I'm going to post the link, and I'm going to leave that link with you. Hang on a second. Okay, history. No. Okay, here it is. Okay, so let me just take this and copy it, and I put it in the chat, and I'll throw it up on screen. Well, I don't know if you're gonna put this type out this big long link. So, but this is the title, okay? Tech billionaires know the AI bubble will burst. They're already building bunkers. Now, if you watch this video, it's only 15 minutes long. And it's an excellent channel. I really like this presenter, and the information that she shares and how she shares it. It's actually a very good thing. She is showing the scam that is AI, and why it's a bubble, and why it is eventually going to burst. And I'm just looking to see if I can find the graphic. Okay, so here's where they're talking about building bunkers, and so the tech billionaires that are actually behind the AI stuff, they are building bunkers as though they're worried about what's going to happen. And that if the thing that they're building actually does crash the economy and crash everything, they're hedging their bets. I'm looking for the graphic that shows how these AI companies are running essentially. Oh, here it is. It's right at the beginning. Okay, here. Let me make that bigger, and I'll make myself smaller. Anyway, you can watch the video. There's the link at the bottom, and it's in the chat. So let me back up for a second and just play this and just see what you guys think. Okay. Um, I don't want to. I'm not going to belabor the point here. You guys can watch that video, the rest of it, if you're interested. The point that's being made is the point that I'm trying to make in this last segment related to AI and illusion. The companies are an illusion. The technology is an illusion. The technology creates illusions. And the idea that the technology improves efficiency is an illusion. Efficiency is an illusion. Okay? Efficiency is it has its place, but it is fundamentally antithetical to the logos, to the God made flesh. Okay? There's elegance in simplicity, right? There's sophistication in simplicity. There's elegance, there's beauty in simplicity, but Efficiency is a base mechanical desire. It is the mechanical law of conservation of energy. And the Ponzi scheme, the shell game that these companies are playing, is that one company will invest in another company so that that company will buy stuff from it with the very money that it just invested in it. And it's just like, and then they go do this over and over and over again, pumping up the GDP of the country with the same money going around and around and around and around. But it's all artificial. It's an illusion. It's fake. It's a scam. Which is now you know why Donald Trump is in bed with all of these AI companies that are artificially pumping up the GDP of the US, and they're artificially pumping up the stock markets. There's no knowledge, there's no understanding in the actual technology, but it's really good at making illusions. That's why they can't use AI to actually do really practical, meaningful tools. Like, for example, that's why when you go into Copilot in your Microsoft Office and you ask it to do something, it says, oh, I can't actually do that for you, but I can point you to the help file that'll explain what to do. In other words, the so-called AI doesn't actually deliver on the promise of the HAL 9000 computer or the droids from Star Wars or Jarvis in the Iron Man suit, who's actually be able to execute on commands. That's why Siri and Alexa, right, are just able to do like the most basic rudimentary things, and they can't understand you half the time because AI is modeled after our own mechanical, rational ego mind, which is attuned to the creation and proliferation, validation, and reinforcement of illusion. Because the whole of the three-dimensional reality is illusion, is illusory. So any technology that's based on that can only be couched and founded in illusion. That's why the most amazing thing AI has been able to do to date is create really, really realistic looking YouTube videos. This is the most impressive thing that AI has been able to do. Because everything else it does is an illusion. But this is an illusion too. But it can't, but in terms of actual knowledge, knowing, knowledge is the antithesis of illusion. Knowledge is truth. It's objective reality. But AI can't know objective reality in the same way that a calculator gives the appearance of knowing objective reality. It can do objective math, but the calculator doesn't know what it's doing. And it also doesn't know about the qualitative aspects of numbers that the consciousness does know, it can know about. And the companies behind this, they're financing the whole thing. It's all a Ponzi scheme. It's all illusory. It's all pumping up an illusory stock market, an illusory economy. The real economy is dead and it's shrinking. And it's and Benjamin Raphael adds, the entire money system is a scam. So look, the printing of money, it's not backed by gold, it's not by, and the whole Bitcoin thing, I'm sorry. the whole cryptocurrency thing, that's all just another level of illusion and scam. So let's go back here. Okay, so I'll come to that question last. Okay, a couple more quick questions. Benjamin says, although finishing the tool was frustrating, it's impressive that you managed to put it together without a programming background. It really shows how much AI output depends on the quality of our prompts. Um, no, absolutely. I mean, obviously it was working off some kind of a template. I mean, it's not an original idea. It's the application of it, hopefully, is somewhat original. But um, no, at the beginning, it worked very well. But it's when you start to get into the details, when you start fine tuning it's like that's when AI breaks down for me anyway. For my experience of it, that's when it starts to fall short. It's like generally overview. In other words, it's lazy. It's lazy and it's sloppy. But as soon as you start getting into the details, as soon as you start getting into precision, as soon as you start getting it breaks down. It doesn't have that ability to that for that fine tuning. It doesn't. Okay, so earlier, Yang Shang said, "Hi Atlas, this is off topic, but I just wanted to add to your discussion from last week regarding the substance that two other relevant films would be Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and The Portrait of Dorian Gray." Oh yes, for sure. Yes, absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly. Yeah. No, and in fact, let's be fair. There are many, many, many different properties, films and stories that deal with this, like even Jack the Ripper. Like there's there are many stories that deal with the duality of the human and the monster, or the two sides of the personality, or the mortal and the shadow self, and like and then of course but you're right, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. And yeah, it is apropos to the substance. So what can we say to sum up here? We're living in a time of separation, segregation, tribalism. We're being divided and conquered. The forces of entropy are at work here, and as within, so without. AI is another one of those forces, without a shadow of a doubt. AI is not bringing anybody together. It's driving more of a wedge between everybody. In fact, theater attendance is down, way down, and AI slop and all these videos, and now people getting their hands on this technology. People are going to be making their own movies. People are going to be making their own content. And because of that, especially young people, younger generations are not going to want to congregate and come together to have a shared experience of truth, of real art. They're going to go less to the theater and less concerts, everything else. They're going to be at home generating their own AI music or generating their own AI movies, or doing what a lot of people think are going to happen is people are going to take existing movies, and even the movie studios will get in on this and allow you to put you and all your friends into Star Wars or into The Untouchables or into, The Godfather. And then you can make your own customized, personalized version of Lawrence of Arabia where you star as Lawrence, or make your own custom version of Titanic as you star as Rose, and you get to kiss Leonardo DiCaprio, and you get to like watch him drown and sink under the ocean, right? So it's like when that happens, nobody's going to go to the theater anymore. They're gonna watch everything at home, and plus everybody's home theater is more comfortable. They get their snacks, they get everything, right? So these things that at least brought us together, AI technology is going to come in to separate us even more. Or if we do come together, it'll be online with an avatar in a virtual way, just like in MMORPGs, or there'll be some virtual theater or virtual AI created online universe, and we'll be there with like virtual reality helmets, and we'll have these avatars. This is what the metaverse was about, right? But the early version of this was garbage, right? So it didn't go anywhere. But rest assured that these kinds of technologies that are here to create more convincing illusions, ever more convincing illusions for people to lose themselves in, for people's consciousness to become enslaved in. It's like the Matrix is coming, right? The Matrix is already here inside of us, but there's a whole new Matrix out there that they're coming to do to deepen the schism between you and your higher self. And that's why this little film, based on real history in the 60s and 70s, the Jesus Revolution, we need a new Jesus Revolution. It needs to be rekindled. It needs to be brought, but to come back at a whole new level, because we are in the age of the Kali Yuga. We are in the end times. The second coming of Christ must come, and that will be defined by what the Buddhists call the Buddha Maitreya, the Buddha of the synthesis. That is the work of the Christ. It is always the work of the Christ. To come and join, come and be with me, come and sit at my table, and I will feed you of my own flesh and blood, if necessary. Bring you my hungered, weak, and weary masses, right? And I will give you rest, right? It's even a hymn, Catholic hymn that we used to sing in church. And that's actually became one of the mottos. It's on the Statue of Liberty, I believe, where it says, "Bring me your weary, your weak and weary and huddled masses," or something like that. It's from the Bible. I can't remember which chapter, which verse, which book, but maybe the Song of Solomon. I'm not sure. Benjamin says, like in the movie Ready Player One. And Benjamin says, where people don't have real jobs, they're just online all the time. Yeah, and these virtual worlds based on video games and all these other properties. Yeah, Ready Player One is actually not a bad allegory for what's going on and what's coming, for sure. All right. Are there any more questions or comments? We passed the 3-hour mark, so we might as well call it a day. You can watch this, by the way, on Netflix. The Jesus Revolution. That's where I watched it anyway. And I do recommend it. It's not because it's such a, fantastic film. Like, it's not going to win any awards for acting or directing or cinematography or anything like that. It's just the story, and hopefully everything that I've shared with you today about the themes in it and how incredibly saturated it is with that theme of bridge building and making connections and inviting people in, and the growth and the strength in numbers that means. And it's a reminder, and it's a case study for work that is done in that Maitreya Buddha spirit, in the Holy Spirit, the Christic spirit of inclusion, of belonging, of bridging gaps, of overcoming divides, and the birth of the fourth way, which opens up to us when we set ourselves to the task of uniting that which was torn asunder, of healing schisms. That is the Christic way. That is the Christic force. Not dividing, uniting. And that's why we practice White Tantra. Because that is the metaphysical, scientific embodiment of that principle, that the Christ is born within us when we partake in Immaculate Conception, when we allow the Holy Spirit to unite with our Divine Mother. Divine Masculine and Divine Feminine in sacred union and Immaculate Conception to give rise to the fire of fire and the light of lights and the being of beings, who is the Christ. And that's the fourth way, the 1111. And the fourth way, the phallus and the uterus. That is the cross. That is the sign of the Christ. Phallus and uterus. Right? It's all connected. It's all connected. And remember, Jesus' revolution, by the way, is INRI. Igne natura renovator integra. The fire renews nature incessantly. And when you take a cross and you revolve it, right? The Christ, the He Zeus, the Jesus, the cross, but you revolve it, you get the swastika. The ancient symbol. The ancient spiritual symbol. Which is in thousands of years old in countless different religions. And it is precisely the renewal, the revolution of Christ, of the fire of fires and the light of lights. I'm looking for my meme that reveals all of this. Yeah, here we go. Okay, so in the bottom right-hand corner here, you see the swastika, right? And here, like the E, this is the spiral E. That's Igne Natura Renovator Integra. It's the alm of life. It's the spiral. It's the cross in motion. That's what the swastika means. INRI, Igne Natura Renovator Integra. So all of this and so much more is encoded in this Jesus revolution and what we've been talking about today, this bridging of gaps. And this is the time, this is the age, the Kali Yuga of the Buddha Maitreya, of the second coming of Christ. So it's up to you to decide if you want to be a part of that revolution or not. And I encourage you to watch the film and I'm sure you'll get something out of it. Benjamin says, oh yeah, okay, we already covered that one. Okay, so thank you all for spending your Sunday afternoon with me and with one another. And I hope I'm give you guys a couple minutes just in case if you want to ask a couple questions or not. I'm not sure. If not, have a great week. And hopefully I'll see you again next week. I'm sure that between now and then, another serendipitous synchronicity will cross my path and will inspire me to make it the focal point of next week's live stream, as I always do. These are very, very rarely do I plan these ahead of time. They're never scripted, and sometimes I don't know until the last minute what it is I'm here to talk about. But it always reveals itself to me, and that's another aspect of, seeking the signs on the path, right? Those signs, if they don't lead to unification, if they don't lead to unity, if they don't lead to that Jesus revolution, uh, take a second look, step back and meditate and really look within yourself, because we are in that time. Benjamin says, thank you for sharing your insights today, sir. I've realized I've been consuming so many videos that it's made me a bit biased. I appreciate the reminder to stay more objective. Mutaga 33 says, thank you, Attlas. Your teaching and consistency is inspiring. Well, thank you very much for that, Mutaga, and thank you for being here. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Again, hope you have a great week. Take care of yourselves and each other. And as always, inferential peace. Take care, everyone. We'll talk to you soon.